So today marks the 1-year anniversary of the death of the godfather of gore, Herschell Gordon Lewis. He died September 26th, 2016, at the age of 90. Herschell Gordon Lewis was a huge inspiration on me. He was the godfather of gore. Without him, we would not have all these ultra-violent horror movies. And while some people might think that that's, something inherently negative he gave us, I believe it's something immensely positive. He proved you could do a lot and become a legend with no budget at all. And he is one of my biggest inspirations when it comes to wanting to be a filmmaker. And before he passed away, he gave us one last film. That film is tonight's film, which is Herschell Gordon Lewis's Bloodmania, an anthology film with 2 of the segments directed by Herschell. Before I get into this, I gotta say, this film was announced when I was in my senior year of high school. That was nearly 3 years ago. It just now got a release this past summer on Amazon streaming, Amazon Prime Video streaming, and that's where I watched it. If you have a Prime membership, you can watch it there yourself if you're interested. So, every single segment in this film is introduced by Herschell himself. And I don't know why, but there's always been something about, Herschell's speaking voice and his mannerisms and how he kind of presents himself that always made me think he was just, the, coolest guy ever. He was just suave as hell. And yeah, I just always like to see interviews with him and stuff because he's just he just seems like the coolest, nicest guy ever. And the first segment, which is one of the ones directed by Herschell Gordon Lewis, is about a guy with a hook for a hand, and the hook eventually gets possessed and makes him kind of mutilate himself. This segment is both intentionally and unintentionally hilarious. And the best thing about the segment is the gore and the laughably bad acting. Prepare to hear that about 3 or 4 more times. Prepare to hear about 2 or 3 more times, I should say. I really like this segment. It was poorly acted and poorly written, and it really wasn't that well shot, and the sound mix is a little off. It just doesn't sound very good, but I still can look past all of that and really, really enjoy it. I'm going to give the first segment a 4 out of 5, definitely. The second segment, it has to do with a couple that gets into a car accident, and then after that it just goes down the rabbit hole as this kind of cerebral, psychological horror splatter, with some really cool gore effects and everything, and a torture scene that's kind of rough to watch, at least for me. The thing about this segment is it's not a comedy. It's not comedic in the slightest. It is way too serious, way too down note, and it's not as cheesy and stupid as you would expect from what you'd seen so far. That being said, the acting isn't absolutely horrible, but it isn't very good either. The effects, as always, are good, other than the CG blood they decided to put in this one, which was really, really, really bad. Overall, this segment is pretty much skippable. This is what really weighs the film down quite a bit, in my opinion. And I'm going to go ahead and give this segment a 2 out of 5, maybe a 1.5 out of 5, mainly because the short isn't the most boring thing I've ever seen. I've seen definitely more uninteresting and boring segments in an anthology film. But it's got some really good gore that I think keeps it interesting. And like I said, it was a little too serious, but it was still, kind of interesting to watch. Not necessarily entertaining or enjoyable, because it's fairly mean-spirited and down-note. The third segment is the second one, directed by Herschell Gordon Lewis. I'll be honest, I did not expect him to be the director of this segment. I expected him to have directed the last segment, because the last segment feels very much like Herschell's work. The third segment starts out as a kind of sitcom, complete with a laugh track and title. And this guy lives with his wife and cat in this house, pretty normal life, and then he finds something living in the walls that eventually kills his wife. He sells the house to a new family, and this family discovers what's hiding inside the walls. And it's a very, very much a return to form from the previous segment. This one is gory and cheesy. The acting isn't really half bad. It's decently atmospheric, like kind of creepy actually. And completely entertaining. Like I was having a good time watching it. It was definitely pretty funny actually. So I'm gonna give the fucking third segment, which was directed by Herschell, a 4 out of 5 as well. Then we get on to the final segment, which was probably the best segment in the entire film. I'm saving the best for last. It basically is about this band manager who, at the beginning of the segment, fucks this deaf woman before cutting off her hands and then cutting her head in half down the middle. He then goes to work and loses his job and starts to lose his shit and mutilate himself and eventually go out and start killing people. It's probably the best segment, probably the goriest segment as well. I mean, it's got some pretty gnarly death scenes that I thought were pretty cool. And, yeah, I genuinely love the final segment of the film, which was, like, called Gorgeous. The final segment is a 5 out of 5 for me. I really, really do love it. Now, let me get this out of the way with this film first. If you like Herschell Gordon-Lewis's films, this is definitely worth a watch. It was his final film before his passing. It is poorly written, it's poorly acted, it's funny, both intentionally and unintentionally. There are some pretty good gore effects. There are also some fun, cheesy gore effects. If you like, you know, gory movies and cheesy gore effects, as well as and you enjoy laughing at bad movies, then this is highly recommended. If you're a fan of Herschell, definitely, it's definitely worth your time. It's a decently shot film. It's decently edited. You know, everything from a technical standpoint is really good, except for the sound mix on the first segment, which was really, really rough for some reason. But the rest of the segments didn't have that problem. As far as pacing goes, the pacing is alright throughout the entire film, except for that second segment, which is really slow and easily the longest segment in the entire film. And yeah, it's a shame that it's so slow and so serious. On the gore meter from 1 to 10, 1 being something like Nosferatu, 10 being something like Peter Jackson's Brain Dead, Herschell Gordon-Lewis's Bloodmania is probably sitting at a solid 6. It is a fairly gory little flick. You know, it's definitely not for the weak. Those with a weak stomach, or those who cannot handle some extreme violence. I'm not going to sit here and say it's anything like revolutionary, and I honestly don't think I would say it's as gory as, like, maybe the Gore Girls or the Wizard of Gore. You know, I don't think it's as gory as those two. Maybe almost as gory as those. But the thing is, the Wizard of Gore didn't really have much of a plot anyway. It was just a magician torturing women, and then that was really it for the whole movie. But I would highly recommend this film, especially to fans of Herschell. While it's not as good as the Eternal Classics, at least his two greatest films for me, The Wizard of Gore and Blood Feast, it's more on par with Blood Feast 2, All You Can Eat, which some people didn't really like because it went from being unintentionally hilarious to intentionally funny. But I honestly thought that was a really, really fun little kind of self-referential horror film, and that's kind of what this is. There are definitely some references in there to some mainstream stuff. There's references in there to Herschell's films, and I really do like it overall. I would definitely say check this one out. I'm going to go ahead and give this one like a 3.5 out of 5. It's far from a perfect, like, 5 out of 5 like I would give Blood Feast, or, you know, a near fucking, like, 5 that I would give, like, the Gore Girls or the Wizard of Gore, but it's still very much worth your time, and I would say definitely worth checking out. I know I've said that a few times already. But, yeah, this review is dedicated to the memory of Herschell Gordon Lewis. May he keep the heads rolling, even in death. This is Biscuit Boo Horror Reviews, signing off. Peace.